Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. My name is Peter Reardon, and I'm the head of Worldwide Broadcast Business Development for AWS. This session is State of Media Content Distribution. Thank you so much for joining us today. In our agenda today, we're going to talk about media content distribution trends. We're going to talk about customer insights. We're going to talk about some partner innovation. We're going to talk about some highlights from AWS during the course of the year, and then we're going to finish up with a brief story about innovation on AWS. Media content distribution trends. Some of the things that we're seeing this year sort of build on each other, starting with increased demand for content from our consumers as they're able to shift from platform to platform faster than they've ever been able to before. Broadcasters, as a result, need to constantly adapt and change to that consumer behavior and make sure that they're always visible in front of those eyeballs. So this is creating a foundational shift for us as an industry, not only about replacing old hardware with new hardware, but about shifting from hardware to software and potentially from a CapEx to an OpEx model. What this sort of unlocks for us all is the ability to do some experimentation with intent. We can stand up a channel now for much, much less than we used to. The cost has been reduced by 97% over 20 years. So if we want to stand up a channel for a 2 or 3 week run of a marketing experiment or consumer feedback, we can do that very easily. Or a sporting event, a pop-up channel to support those sporting events is also now possible. So we can play with things in ways that we never were able to do with on-prem facilities. The other thing that's sort of unlocked this year for us is that there's now much greater acceptance of the idea of a globally diverse workflow or remote workers participating in live production or in content playout. And so that's really enabled or accelerated the adoption of a lot of workflows on AWS, and that's very exciting for us. And then the final piece of this is that with the next-gen distribution and the advent of these new distribution channels like 5G or ATSC3 or others around the world, the acceptance of IP as a primary distribution mechanism is increasing, and that's ultimately going to lead to increased consumer engagement and reach. From a customer perspective, Fox is one of those stories that we announced last year at reInvent. They had a really big challenge where they had to make large capital investments. It was hard, it was expensive, it was time-consuming to add channels to an on-prem facility. Systems are typically interconnected in a manner that makes replacing a single system or service really difficult. And then they were experiencing bottlenecks around OTT or VOD distributions, especially for time-sensitive workflows like C3 or C7. So over the course of this year, we've been working closely with Fox. We've been working on bringing flexibility into the picture, the ability to launch services quickly and then decommission them when they're no longer needed, the ability to be scalable and handle bursty traffic for special events or peak viewership periods. And most importantly, I think, the ability for them to deploy best-of-breed solutions as they work through this. In early 2021, we're targeting that Fox will launch a state-of-the-art networks operations center where they'll have limited on-prem solutions and playout will be done primarily out of AWS by that point. So we're really excited about how that's been progressing. In 2020, we were also recognized as part of a group of folks around a technical Emmy Award. It's focused on pioneering a public cloud-based media supply chain for content ingest management and delivery. This is something that grew out of the partnership with AWS and Evertz and Discovery as Discovery was starting their cloud journey. SDVI came into that to handle the content processing over that time frame and getting those channels up and running. And then the Fox Network Engineering and Operations team, which is now part of Walt Disney Television, was also recognized for their contributions. So we couldn't be more proud to be associated with this group of partners and customers and this recognition from the Academy. So where this all sort of leads for us on the broadcast side of the business is with customers like Discovery and Fox and Viacom CBS and many, many others, we now have over 16 channels running on AWS. And what that tells us and our customers is we're no longer in a bleeding edge of technology. These workloads are maturing and they're reliable, and we've got multiple options from different partners in terms of how you want to deploy. And so this fact for us is sort of a big welcome piece of information as we uncovered this during the course of this year. So we're thrilled that we're seeing this kind of adoption of cloud play out. On the OTT side of the business, the Food Network Kitchen created a flexible digital channel with live and on-demand classes, and they needed to make sure that they could make that content accessible to users on any devices. And so this project is something that took about 10 weeks from the time it was an idea to the time the product was launched. And the end result was a complex video chain made manageable by leveraging AWS Media Services. And Discovery's been really, really happy with the response from the consumers on this product, and we're just thrilled to be able to be part of this success. Another OTT service in India, Z5 is a large ad-supported platform, and they wanted to start to leverage server-side ad insertion workflows. They started to use AWS Elemental Media Live for encoding and delivering 80 live channels to the viewers. They used AWS Elemental Media Package for just-in-time packaging of 20 channels plus. And then they used Elemental Media Tailor for the server-side ad insertion, delivering 100 million ads monthly across 18 plus channels. Huge numbers, and just speaks to the scalability that we can bring from a cloud-based deployment. The great news on the OTT side of the business is we're now seeing that over 500 million subscribers worldwide are streaming media content on platforms powered by AWS. Again, another one of those big highlights that we couldn't be more proud of. As we look at some of the partner innovation in 2020, we can't ignore some of the work that Grass Valley has been doing. They launched their Agile Media Processing platform in the April timeframe with their Master Control product. And the Master Control product brings fully elastic, the ability to quickly spin up new channels or test services. Remote multi-viewer monitoring is available. You can control it literally from anywhere that you've got connectivity. And then the Playout service was announced a little bit later in the fall. And this is a cloud-first microservices-based architecture. It's scalable, it's self-healing, it's fault-tolerant, it's resilient, and you really don't have to sacrifice any reliability or SLA levels as you're using these products. And you can see here on the screen that there are a number of AWS products that they've leveraged to make this work. And we've really enjoyed the partnership with Grass Valley and look forward to that continuing for a long time going forward. Another real great innovation that I'm excited about is that Imagine and Sinclair Communications, Sinclair Broadcast Group specifically. Imagine was approached by Sinclair to launch a couple of channels in the cloud. Sinclair is very forward-thinking and wanted to start figuring out how to look at migrating some of their products and services over. And so Imagine took an approach where they looked at the way that they would normally deploy their Versio product, and they looked at the AWS services that were available. And they started to figure that it might make more sense to take sort of a hybrid approach to deploying Versio on AWS. So they shifted from deploying an EC2 instance to do transcoding to leveraging AWS Elemental Media Convert for that and pay for a transcode on a transactional basis rather than always having an EC2 instance running. They also shifted their database to AWS RDS Postgres. All of these things lower the total cost of ownership compared with their initial deployment with all of those additional EC2 instances to address each of those needs. Finally, we have Amagi and A&E Networks in the UK. And this is something that was originally stood up. This is cloud-based playout. It was originally deployed to be a disaster recovery operation, and through the course of the year, some of the circumstances that have led us all to work remotely have driven the same thing for A&E Networks, and they decided to shift it from being a disaster recovery operation to being their primary playout, and that shift happened over a course of a couple of weeks. There are now over 50,000 hours of content that are ingested and supporting this operation. And A&E Networks is able to operate this now remotely from wherever they want to be engaged with, and then manage all of their broadcast operations in that way. They're reaching multiple geographies from this instance. On the AWS side of the house, we had an announcement for AWS Cloud Digital Interface, or CDI, in September. This is the ability to transport uncompressed live video between EFA-enabled EC2 instances. And so what this basically means is you can bring your video into the cloud, and when you're going from application to application within AWS, it's able to be moved at ultra-low latency manner. This supports ultra-high def resolutions up to 60 frames per second, reliable low latency packet transmission. And AWS CDI was developed to solve an industry problem, but it was part of our commitment to Fox as we were supporting their migration into AWS. Amazon Interactive Video Services was also launched this year. This is a live streaming solution that lets you build lean-forward interaction experiences with ultra-low latency live video. It's easy to integrate into websites and apps. It's easy to start streams with just a few clicks. It's very intuitive for the users. It lets your audience interact with each other by adding a virtual space to chat alongside your streaming content. There are e-commerce applications where you can let viewers make purchases or donations related to the content being shown. And you can add voting and polls or even real-time Q&A to the interface. So that's a really neat product that launched this year. And then the last highlight is AWS Elemental Link. This is a small portable device that connects a live video source to AWS. It's shipped to you fully configured to your AWS account. So you simply connect the device to power an IP network and a live video source. Once connected, Link automatically starts sending thumbnail images and is available as a source for Media Live in the AWS Media Console, and it's ready for live streaming. It has adjustable bitrate based on conditions up to 1080p at 60 frames per second.
Media and entertainment is undergoing a massive shift as the viewer takes center stage. Audiences expect new content customized just for them, available anytime, any place, on any screen. To keep customers engaged, media companies must rethink everything, from how they create content to how that content is distributed and monetized. AWS is here to help. With the broadest and deepest cloud platform and a suite of services purpose-built for each step in the media supply chain. Managed services to render, process, store, distribute, and monetize video lets you stay focused on your content and your business, not your infrastructure. Integrated analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning help you understand your audiences and content like never before, accelerating formerly manual processes and unlocking new revenue streams. Media companies across the world choose AWS for its mature cloud platform and proven experience. Whatever your media workload or technology roadmap, AWS has solutions in production at scale today. To accelerate your path to innovation and compress time to market, AWS Media Solutions are supported by a global community of partners and professional services teams. AWS helps media companies simplify operations, maximize the value of their content, and put the audience first. AWS for media and entertainment. The future of media starts now.
I'm here today with Gareth Capon, who's the CEO of Gravio. Gareth, thanks for joining this morning. Since you started Gravio as a cloud-native service running on AWS from the outset, how does that influence how you grow and develop your product. And before you even tell us about that, tell us a little bit about what your product does and what you're bringing to the production community.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it's great to have a chance to have the conversation. As you say, we started Gravio about 6 or 7 years ago as a cloud native video platform. When we started out, we looked at the ecosystem around video, particularly with regards to what's happening on the social networks, and thought about how we could build a different type of production platform and actually take advantage of the benefits of being in the cloud, much which was a lot newer in media and entertainment 6 or 7 years ago. In fact, we show a slide here. I can sort of talk through some of the differences of the way that we thought about the production environment. So you're moving from a world of high capital expenditure, lots of staff, hard limits on capacity, and quite a lot of impact on the environment, moving to a completely different platform, which is based on flexible pricing that scales on demand, lots more collaboration, and they're successful anywhere. And that's really the way that we thought about Gravio as a business, as a video platform. But many of those technologies were a lot more immature when we started the company. So when we actually started the business, if we move on, we can talk a bit about the products and sort of suite of services that we built. When we started the business, we were a live clipping company. We enabled broadcasters, rights holders, federations to share short-form video content across a range of digital platforms. And since then, actually, we've built a much broader suite of tools, not only for sort of live clipping and on-demand service and editing, but most recently a live production and streaming platform, which is really one of the core parts of our service today, and is certainly part of the future of Gravio as we look forward into 2021 and beyond. I think from the big change really was when moving from a position where we deliver content to digital and social platforms, but really thinking about all types of video ingest and distribution. So that's looking at social, OTT, and even broadcast. And actually today, we've got our first broadcast services going out on television using our production platform on a regular basis, something which we probably didn't even think was possible just 2 or 3 years ago. So from a development standpoint, working on AWS, allowing AWS provide that infrastructure, that connectivity for these services is really important to us. Not just the use of EC2 and the compute power, but things like the serverless compute access, with Lambda and Firegate, using storage on EC2, and then even obviously some of the more recent developments in media with Media Connect and CDI and others. So it's been a really important partnership for us, and we're quite proud that we built our platform from the outset on AWS and really thought about cloud natively from the start.
And so that then leads you to this really great scenario where you're relying on the ability to stand things up and take things down, so that you're only paying for the production tools while they're in use. And so when you're comparing it to an OB truck or a production truck rolling to a site, which has great periods of inactivity because it's on the road from one place to another or between events, you don't have that challenge with Gravio. So you guys sort of open up some great cost benefits to the conversation. How is that allowing you to innovate on AWS? What kinds of things are you doing that are exciting and different than what you could do on-prem?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. In fact, we can jump onto the next slide and I can give you a sense. I mean, from a production standpoint, obviously the most important thing for the production team is to make sure that they've got a reliable and high quality experience. And in the past, all of those infrastructure services were built on top of hardware and software, and obviously most of them still are today. By moving those workflows and the services to the cloud, obviously we can change a lot of the environment in which the people work, but also ultimately the cost infrastructure and the flexibility of the service that we build around that. So when we think about a traditional OB truck or cloud production, you've got many people on site with significant amounts of infrastructure. You need to bring people to that venue or to that studio, wherever that may be in the world. Set up infrastructure for that event, scale it up. Have people on site, and then scale it down again when it's finished. When we start to think about rebuilding those services natively in the cloud, it means that you can bring in the feeds for the production remotely. You can switch them from anywhere in the world, in a web browser. You can add graphics from a third-party service from somewhere else, and ultimately the people who are working on the production don't have to be physically located not only at the venue of the production, they don't even have to be physically located together. And clearly, in 2020, with some of the challenges of the pandemic and the world that we've faced in the last 6 to 9 months, the ability to be able to deliver these services from home has been increasingly important. So we definitely we see this as a cost and an environmental benefit too, in the fact that we don't need to move such large numbers of people and infrastructure around the world. But there's also the ability to think about the different types of services you can build. This isn't just about saving cost. It's also about reinvesting some of the production budget into services and new types of production and video that may not have been possible in the past. And the fact that you can scale these things up on demand is really important. The other thing that I think from a Gravio perspective that's really important in terms of the cloud and innovation is that we also can build and test our own services. When new technologies are released, we can scale up on AWS very quickly. We can test services. We can iterate those products really quickly. So we're not really held to the traditional sort of release and product development cycle of hardware. And that's incredibly important in terms of our product development, that we can not only be agile to the needs of customers, and we've obviously seen many of those needs changing quite dramatically this year, but also be able to iterate those services really quickly. And we really pride ourselves as a company in actually listening to the feedback of customers and partners and making sure we can iterate appropriately around that. And actually being built on AWS in the cloud is fundamentally important to that process.
Yeah, you guys have responded very well to the market cry for remote production this year, and so we've been thrilled to see your success in that area. We announced in September CDI, and I'm curious about how CDI has influenced what you guys are up to.
We're really excited about CDI. I mean, it's no coincidence that as you move production workflows to the cloud, one of the greatest concerns from people in the industry that you're going to have lots of levels of encoding. You're going to reduce the quality of the video. You're going to introduce latency to processes, and you're going to make it very difficult to run the same level of quality of production that you could do in an on-premise environment. CDI is a really important underlying technology to allow us to change that. As we start to move uncompressed video around in the cloud, a very low latency between our production instances, that really increases the flexibility and the scope of the services we build. But it also it opens up new compute power. We can start to do more on the production instances that we run because we're not required to set a level of encoding or compress the video if we're moving it between one of our production instances to another. So I think that we're at the very early stages of this. We're really excited about what it represents. We're particularly excited about how it might drive interoperability between services and other partners, because building an open platform is sort of fundamental to the way that we think about Gravio and how we're going to develop the service. But I think it also gives a level of confidence to people in the industry that we can build production services in the cloud for live video, which are comparable to things which have been built, for many years, if not decades, in infrastructure and hardware.
Right, and at a significantly lower cost because of the nature of the burstability or scalability of the cloud based on what you're doing. So with all of this sort of together, what excites you about the future of Gravio on AWS?
Well, I think that what we've been talking around is building out a set of cloud production technologies which are brand new, solving challenges, certainly in live production, many of which are not solved today, and actually working with the AWS Elemental and Media Services team to help us address those is really exciting. But if we look forward specifically from a technology standpoint, we've touched on CDI already. I think CDI is really important. The ability to move at lower latency, much less compressed amounts of video for live production is really important. I would also say that you look at Media Connect, that probably is heavily associated with that. We need to be able to ingest and egress, really high quality, high fidelity content, broadcast quality content, and be able to do that reliably. Media Connect's really important to us for that process. As a cloud production business, we obviously think about mobility a lot. So the developments in 5G are also really important. We've started to talk to many of the hardware manufacturers about 5G in terms of contribution for video. But when you look at services such as Wavelength being developed now by AWS, can we run more of our infrastructure much closer to the edge of the network, much closer to our customers? That's something that we're definitely going to invest in the coming weeks and months. And then finally, as we look forward into next year and beyond, I think we're still at the very early stages of AI and machine learning in production. We've integrated some of the services already, things like transcribe for captions, or looking at some of the computer vision processes that are built by AWS. But we don't want to build these algorithms ourselves. We want to take advantage of some of the services being built on platforms like AWS to support that. And I think that actually we've really only touched the surface of what AI and ML means in a production standpoint. And I think that's going to be a really important part of the next 3 to 4 years.
Well, listen, that's fantastic. I'm so excited for how you guys are positioned and the innovation that you're bringing to this live production segment of the industry in particular, and really looking forward to see how you guys are going to be growing going forward. And I wish you, Gareth, nothing but the best success on AWS, and as a partner, we really appreciate what you guys have been up to. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. Great to talk.
What a great story of innovation on AWS. I'm grateful that we have customers and partners that aren't satisfied with using the same old tools and are excited about innovation. Thanks for joining us for today's session. I appreciate your time. Please let us know how we can help you wherever you are on your cloud-based journey. And please do take the survey at the end of this session. Thanks again. Have a great day.